Good evening, everyone. I'm the real fast warm-up act, so you don't have to worry too much. I would ask that if you have cell phones, pagers, beepers, anything like that, that you at least put them in silent, just to not distract from the evening here. First of all, over on the table there was the agenda and a couple of handouts. If you wanted to take them, by no means did you have to, but we're going to go through. I'm going to go over a few ground rules real fast, introduce the legislators on the dais behind me. Each of them will then do a little bit more to talk about about themselves and about the process a little bit, and then as soon as they're done, we'll open the floor for any questions that you have. Because we are streaming this live over the internet and recording it for future use, if you have a question, we ask that you just come up, ask a question at the mic. It is sensitive, so if you come up, you don't have to lean way into it. Just come up and ask your question, and then feel free to have a seat again. This will be available on the internet within a day or two at the legislation website at OregonLegislature.gov if you want to come back and look at it again, because it was so exciting the first time. You want to come back and see it again. We do thank you for coming and showing up this evening. I know everybody is quite often busy, but we're happy to see you here. So, without much else, I would like to introduce the legislators who are here this evening. First, we have Senate President Peter Courtney. Senator Courtney is the most veteran member of the Oregon Legislative Assembly and is now serving a record-setting 6th term as Senate President. He's in his 29th overall year in the legislature. He previously served 7 terms in the Oregon House of Representatives, including 4 terms as the House Democratic Leader. He represents Senate District 11, which includes portions of Salem, Gervais, and Woodburn. To his right is Senator Jackie Winters. Senator Winters is serving her 3rd term in the Senate. Prior to being elected, Senator Winters served 2 terms in the Oregon House of Representatives. She has lived in Salem for 42 years and served on many boards and commissions, including the Board of Directors of the Salem Chamber of Commerce and the Oregon Restaurant Association. She currently serves on the board of Goodwill Industries. Senator Winters initiated the Meth Strike Force and the I Love Me program. She represents Senate District 10 in Salem. Representing the House is Speaker of the House Tina Kotec. She is serving her 4th term in the Oregon House. She is the Speaker of the House and the co-chair of the Joint Capital Construction Subcommittee. Before her election to the Oregon House of Representatives in 2006, Speaker Kotec worked as the policy director for the nonprofit advocacy organization Children First for Oregon. Prior to joining Children First, she was a public policy advocate for the Oregon Food Bank. Speaker Kotec serves House District 44, which includes portions of North and Northeast Portland. And finally, we have Representative Mike McLean. Representative McLean is serving his 2nd term in the Oregon House of Representatives and is the House Republican leader. He sits on the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, which is in charge of writing the state's budget, and the Task Force on O&C counties. Representative McLean represents House District 55, which is one of the largest House districts in Oregon, and covers portions of Deschutes, Crook, Jackson, Klamath, and Lake counties. So with that introduction, thanks again for coming, and I turn it over to Senator Courtney.
Thank you, Kevin. They outlined that we're supposed to tell you a little bit about ourselves and our district, but actually Kevin's done that, and since I think there's about an hour allocated for the 4 of us at our presentations, I'll just have a few brief remarks because we also have provided opportunity for questions, and I really hope that you will take advantage and ask questions, because I think that's the best way we can learn of how we can either better this process or any confusions you may have about it. One of the concerns I have is that just about every day when I'm out during a legislative session, I hear from someone say, well, can I come to the Capitol? I mean, can I even come to the Capitol? And it always hurts me to hear that, because this Capitol is the people's building. It's not our building. This is a committee room. This is one of the more dynamic of all the committee rooms. And there's actually a meeting going on as we speak on the Columbia River crossing, the big bridge down the way. And in effect, they may even pass out the bill tonight, or if not tonight, maybe a week from tonight. So it's very important you understand that this is your process, this is your building. If you don't help us with it, then it makes our ability to do the job that much more difficult. Oregon has dramatically changed in the last few years because of you. Voters overwhelmingly said in the last few years, by 68% vote, that they wanted us to have annual sessions. We never used to have them. We now have an annual session. We meet for 160 days during the odd number year, like 2013, and we meet for 35 days during the even number, like in 2014. We'll meet the month of February, and we'll go for 35 days. We don't have to go 160 days, and we don't have to go 35 days. In fact, we have said we'd like to leave by the end of June, which would be about 145 days. We'll see if we can get that done. But no matter, if we're not out of here by July 13th, we're in a lot of trouble, because we pretty much will probably end up in a special session and have to come back, which we don't want to do. So having said that, I'd just like to give you a few figures. I understand that as of today, there have been 665 bills introduced on the Senate side. We have the Senate, which is on this side, and the House. My distinguished colleagues will talk about that. It's on that side. Senators have introduced some 665 bills on the Senate side. On the House side, it's 1,139. That's the number of bills. That's just through the day. Now, the deadline for most bills, though, is Thursday. And I hope my fellow legislators are listening to this, because many times I find out they sort of don't remember these deadlines, and they come to me and they want me to grant extensions, and I tend not to become grumpier than many people claim I am, and difficult to deal with, hurts my feelings. So I hope that everybody understands that Thursday, more or less, is the deadline for most bills. We do allow some exceptions beyond that, but there are tremendous limits. Now, it's my job as the Senate President to let's just take the 665 bills and assign them to committees. We have so many committees, and each committee has a chair and a vice chair and other members. We're a very special system in this nation. Many states don't do this. This legislature is driven by a committee process. The work done on a bill is done in places like this. This is where the public comes and testifies, sitting there. This is where you come and say, I don't like this bill, or I do like this bill. It's very important. You come in from wherever you come from, you get a chance to testify. Total freedom. Sign up. You don't have to be a lobbyist. You can come from far away. You can come from Salem. This is where the work's done. They make amendments to bills, and they vote it out. If they don't vote it out, the bill dies pretty much here in these committees. Very seldom do we actually take a bill and put it on the Senate or the House floor. Very seldom it's done. Very seldom do we amend a bill. It's either voted up or down. So the hard work is done in these committees. It's beautiful, because it gives you, the public, much greater access. If you didn't get a chance to really comment on a bill until it was on the Senate floor, you got troubles. Do you see what I mean? This is what makes Oregon special. But we need you to understand that you got to come here and say whether you like Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, 3, or 4. And we have a way, and I'm sure that Kevin will get into that better than me, to let you know when these bills are coming up. And so you know when the public hearings are, and you know what committee rooms to come to. So I hope you're listening to this, because many people say, I don't know how to learn about a bill, or I'm not sure about a bill. Through the electronic systems, and Kevin, I assume you're going to get into this, and others, and really explain, it's very easy to tell where these 665 bills are. It really is on my side. It's very easy to tell what committees they're in, and it's very easy to tell which times they're going to be heard or not heard. So with that, I've spoken quickly, but I really want to give my colleagues an opportunity, and I hope that that's piqued your interest in wanting to come and testify to a bill. I mean it. I beg you to come. I'm sure out of just these 665, I'll bet every one of you could find a bill of them that you probably would want to talk about. I bet you could. Or talk about maybe you don't like it, or you do like it, or you sort of like to see it amended. So again, this belongs to you. I wish we had many more people here tonight, but I'm so grateful that you've come here, because without public input, we really have a tough time doing this job. So with that, I guess it goes over, Kevin, to who's their next? It goes, Senator Winters? They're going to take care of the Senate. The House is mad. They think that they're being treated second. They're not. It's a matter of age and beauty. That's why we go first. Go ahead, Senator. Go ahead.
Gee, speak for yourself.
I know, well, I said agent.
You're the beauty part.
You're the beauty part.
Well, Senator Courtney shares, I share District 10, which is also Salem, and I have Monmouth and Independence and Almsville and Turner, and it's kind of interesting. He has 11 and I have 10, and truly he's correct that we are citizen-driven here in Oregon. Whether you're talking about coming to testify on a bill, and also that we take your ideas. It's not unusual for a concept or addressing a problem to not come from the citizens themselves, both from individuals contacting their legislators and coming into our offices and saying, you know, I believe that here's something that can improve, and so we will draft legislation on behalf of citizenry, as well as you're able to come in to testify before public hearings, which are all posted in advance enough to try to give you enough time and opportunity to get here. We do something else I think in committees that they may not do in other states. When individuals come from a long distance away, you know, I'm fortunate to be here in Salem, and so is Senator Courtney, and so we're right here at home. Our constituents are right here at home, and we can engage, you know, easily. But we have individuals who come from Eastern Oregon and far away, and we try to respect that. So if we know that you're coming from a long distance, we'll take your testimony first. And you know, I think most chairs of committee has honored that practice here, because we want to say that you know, thank you. We recognize the hardship of coming to Salem from Ontario or coming from Pendleton and other places, but we really appreciate that you're coming in to provide us with your input. You know, one of the questions was, how can citizens best participate in the legislative process? Oregon legislators, I think most of us our doors are open. I have to tell you that I know, I can't speak for my other colleagues, but most of us like you to come see us. I think we're all getting a little overburdened with emails. This new technology has, for some of us, I'm not high tech. I'm a part of the chronologically advantaged group. I will admit that. So, you know, having to come in and try to wade through all of the emails that we receive can be overwhelming at times. But I still like the personal touch. I still like to, if you've got something that can get in on my schedule and have to talk to you about your issues and what you're concerned about. I still like the piece of actually going out to the community. There's another way. We didn't talk about that, but most of us also are out in the communities to meet and talk to you to say if there's something coming up, and most of us do town halls. Most of us encourage that participation. Senator Courtney talked about that we are unique, and I think he's correct. Oregon has consistently wanted to have the inclusion of its citizens as it passed legislation. I was reminded the other day, one thing that wasn't in my bio, I served two governors. I was on Governor McCall's staff and I was on Governor Tia's staff. And when I was on Governor Tia's staff, I was the state ombudsman. Currently, someone said, you guys at the Capitol, you don't have security? No, we don't have security. And we don't, you know, they say, oh, gee, you guys are at risk. We opted as a legislative body to say this is the people's business building. Not only is it their business, but this is your building. And so, you know, even when we had a gentleman who came in one day that was in the Senate chamber with a weapon, and was an individual who had some emotional, mental health issues, and he was disarmed and what have you. We went on with our business. But truly, we try to make certain that this building is open and accessible to you, the citizenry. And so I'm going to let the junior members, and they'll probably talk about
Yeah, we're not going to get anything through the Senate House this session.
I would want to say there are 30 senators and 60 representatives. And we're fond of saying that, you have the upperclassmen, that's the senators, and the House members are fond of saying, but the building is a little tilted and the water rolls down to the Senate. So with that, Speaker Kotec.
Thank you, Senator. Well, on behalf of the People's Chamber of the House, it's really nice to be here. I'm Tina Kotec. I'm the Speaker of the House, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm really pleased to be here. I really do believe in the public process and public involvement. And just the fact that you're here tonight speaks to the fact that you do too. So I'm just curious, how many people, this is your first time in the Capitol? A couple of you? Well, that's good. Well, you make the first step by being here. It's been amazing to me how many people I've met over the years who, it's their first visit, and the first visit's important. Because then if you have a good experience, you come back. So hopefully those of you who've been here before had a good experience, and we really appreciate you being here. I have maybe a slightly different perspective because my first session here was 2007, but I spent 8 years before that coming down here to the Capitol as an advocate, first for Oregon Food Bank and then for Children First for Oregon. My job was to convince people like us to do things, to help introduce bills, to pass bills, to amend things. And I learned a lot about the process. We learn as kids, how a bill becomes a law. And to some degree, it follows some process. As the senators have said, the committee process is the critical piece. But there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, a lot of things that happen quickly. And, the more you can learn about the process, the more effective you can be. And, it's really great that you're here tonight. I do think sometimes people feel like they're not heard, that things can be daunting and one person really can't make a difference. Oregon's a really amazing place. You can walk down the hallways, you can knock on people's doors, you can get meetings. I used to lobby for the food bank. I'd go to Capitol Hill in D.C. Totally different experience. You always feel like you never actually met an elected person because there's so much staff and the buildings are so big. You really can meet your elected leaders here. Many of us do have town halls. You can meet with us in our districts. I represent neighborhoods and industrial areas in North Portland. I'm that district right before you go into Vancouver, so the airport's in my district, and places like the University of Portland and the St. John's neighborhood. So a lot of residents, a lot of neighborhoods. And we're out in our districts a lot, but during session we're here. So people have to contact us here, and so being here, talking with us in person is really how we get our job done. And we're not experts. We're citizen legislators. We bring our own personal experiences here to our job, depending on where you come from. I was an advocate before I got here, so I focus on the things I worked on before: hunger issues, kids issues, and now as speaker, I have a whole range of new issues I have to learn about. But we're not experts, and so we really do count on, everyday people coming in and saying, I care about this, I care about that, I'm a farmer, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a nurse, and here's my perspective on this bill. That helps us make legislation and do a better job. I hope there are a lot of people watching tonight. I know maybe it's not a big crowd here tonight, but, I know people watch us on streaming, and I get people who say, I watched you at 2 in the morning because I decided to, click in and see what you were doing in committee. So I really do appreciate the Capitol is televising this, because I think there are probably people watching at home. I wanted to give a few tips. I used to train folks to come down here, so I wanted to talk about 3 things to think about when you're here. We have a lot of information thrown at us as legislators. So one of the things you can do as an advocate is be as specific as possible. When you write to us, or you call us, or you email us, or you see us in the hall, you need to be specific. I'm interested in this bill, like a bill number. I'm interested in this amount of money for this program. Because we get so much information in the day, if I don't know what the specific request is or the specific position you want me to take, it's really hard for me to keep track. So the more you can be specific, if you have a big general conversation, but your legislator walks away and you didn't really ask them for anything, you probably have missed an opportunity. So try to be as specific as you can when you communicate with us, because we just are bombarded with information. Again, we get a lot of information, but how you cut through the the noise and really reach us is providing that personal story. I keep mementos and stories that I hear from people during all the bills that I've heard in committee and things that I've worked on. People will tell me how it personally affected them. I need you to do this because, my grandmother was sick and she couldn't get her medication, and she needs you to do this. Is going to help my mom or my sister or whoever, because this will really help me. And those personal stories fill out the story for us, and those are the kind of things to remember. The facts and figures, they're important, but what's the personal story behind what people want? So be specific, give a personal story, and last but not least, follow through. Again, we're all really busy. If you meet with me and you're like, I ask you a question about, I really needed more information about that, and you follow up and send me an email or send me information in the mail, that's really important because, one, it's a second contact, and two, I know you're really committed to this because you've given me the information I need to be a good policymaker. So to the degree that you can be specific and ask for something specific, to the degree that you can personalize it, and always follow up and give the information, because you never have all the information always at one point in time. If you can give us that additional information, we can really be effective, and you can be heard, and you can really impact how a bill gets done. So just a couple tips. I really appreciate you being here tonight, and I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Thank you. I'm Mike McLean. I'm from House District 55. I want to welcome all the constituents from House District 55 who are here tonight. No, none of you? Well, that's quite all right. House District 55 is the second largest footprint. It takes me longer to drive across my district than it takes a speaker to walk across hers. Mine goes from Prineville down to Lakeview. Doesn't include Lakeview, though. Goes Klamath Falls, actually goes around, doesn't include Klamath Falls, over to Medford, but it doesn't include Medford. Again, because we wouldn't want any population in my district. But then you go up Jackson County, you go around Crater Lake, and then up to Sun River, not including Sun River, and then it goes around Bend, it doesn't include Bend, and then up to Crook County. So it's this big sprawling district of cows and trees, and so which is fine by me because I grew up around cows, not trees, but cows nevertheless. But I digress. Here we are at the Citizens Guide to the Legislature. So greetings, citizens. My job here, besides representing House District 55, what I call the Jewel of Oregon, is I also was selected to be the caucus leader for the House Republicans, which means I get to be the one that most people complain to but what each chamber has a thing they call a caucus, where people from one party get together and discuss the bills and the issues and things like that, and so currently in the Oregon legislature there's just members make up are from two parties, Republican and Democrats. Some legislatures have independents. Whigs, I hear, may try to make a comeback, but at any event, currently it's Republicans and Democrats, and the good people of the legislature of the Oregon decided to put the Democrats in charge. So that means that their caucus leader became the speaker, and then the minority caucus leader became me, and so. I thought I'd handle that little part because it's an interesting thing, because when you represent an area where people have to drive 3 hours to 4 hours to come to the Capitol, I don't get a lot of stop-by traffic. And when I do, it's purposeful. People didn't just stroll by. And so it's pretty meaningful for them to come and see me, whether I'm pre-scheduled or not. And so that's a unique situation, because I can't say to someone, come back tomorrow, I have to cut my hair or something like that. I mean, it's you make time, and one of the things that I try to do, and other rural legislators try to do, is make sure that we have some flexibility to get folks in and see them, because it's a pretty rare event. And so I would say, if you are from a district where you're traveling, is call or email or do something to let us know you're coming, because I really like to see my constituents. Despite how I describe my district, I actually have the same number of residents as Speaker Kotec has in her district. And so 6,000 people, and so it's just they don't get here as often. So I communicate sometimes by email, a lot by the telephone, the old-fashioned way of just returning phone calls and talking to folks. I also communicate with constituents by when my wife tells me she was at the store and so said, "Hey, your husband just voted on this bill," and because small towns being what they are. But the second thing I'd say, besides scheduling, is that when you see someone's name on a bill, there's a chief sponsor, and then there are co-sponsors. And I learned this the hard way. The chief sponsor are the representatives or senators that basically introduce the bill. It's either their idea or they worked on it somehow. And the co-sponsors are the other members that are listed afterwards that support the bill. And so if you see a bill and you're reading a bill and it says, House Bill 9999, a bill to disband the Oregon State Beaver football team, introduced by Tina Kotec of Portland, well, then go talk to her. And so when you see other names on there, is you want to focus on who's the first couple of names listed, and that's who you want to talk to, because that's really who's in charge of the bill. I say I learned the hard way because I had some my constituents really take me to task one time to say, "Hey, your name's on this bill. Do you understand X, Y, and Z?" And what I was a co-sponsor, and I said, "You know what? You have brought up some great points. Let's go talk to the chief sponsor and see if we can get that bill amended." And we were able to help navigate that. But then third, I'd also mention that when you have an idea, one of the things that can happen is a legislator can introduce a bill on behalf of someone. Like I'm introducing a bill on behalf of a constituent, actually who ran against me in the general election. Great guy, and he has a good idea, I haven't done all the research on it, and it looks like it's a good idea. And so, but he wants the opportunity to come here and prove the case about rural septic issues and things like that. And so, I think he should have an opportunity to do it. So I'm going to introduce the bill on behalf of. And when you see that phrase, on behalf of a constituent or a group or something, then you'll know that that group that's listed are really the researchers, the folks that are really moving on it. So that's another cue as you look at a bill and you want to come talk to the legislature, is another tip on that. And finally, in my experience with the legislature, which has only been 2 terms, is that I did not spend time here in the building around government like my colleagues did prior to running. And I had to learn the ropes here. And you'll find that when you're here, even if you don't know where the restroom is, or you go to the wrong location, like I did previous to this meeting, I went to room 50 and no one was there. And so I had to find out where's the Citizen's Guide to the Legislature, and someone said, "No, you're supposed to be in hearing room B." But ask. It's just amazing how just stopping and saying, "Where is this room? Where's that room?" and not being embarrassed to ask, because it's a big place and it has a lot of little crooks and cranny, and it can become, even for a freshman legislator like I was 2 years ago, kind of intimidating. But I learned a long time ago, coming from a small town, not to be embarrassed, because if you think you're looking silly, you probably are, so just get over it. And just move forward. So that would be my last little tidbit. And with that, I'll hand it back to our esteemed administrator.
So now, if there are any questions, if someone has a question, yeah, go ahead and step up to the mic and ask your question. Thanks for kicking it off.
My name's Chuck Chode. I live in Kaiser. I belong to a couple of clubs that are involved in amateur prospecting for gold. And so we've been encouraged to come in and testify at hearings, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing, I have a question then from Representative McLean, and perhaps I misunderstood him, but I understood from what you said that the names that would appear on a bill would be the person or persons that are most supportive of that specific bill. So when we go back to our folks and say, you know, you need to write a letter or make a phone call or make personal contact at a hearing, wouldn't it be true that if they contacted those specific people, it would be more likely that that person would be less likely to follow through on their suggestion? So my question would be, shouldn't we be contacting the people that might be persuaded, if we did not like that bill and we did not want that bill to pass, we would be more likely, that person would be most likely to support our desires, as opposed to the person who introduced that bill and would really want that bill to pass?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I hope, did everyone hear the question? Yeah. Okay. And I'd answer it this way. Nobody listens to you more than your own state representative. Now, I know the state senators say they do. But, you know, but we're closer to the people because we are the people's chamber. Mm-hmm. And now I'll let them speak for themselves. But I know that when a constituent of mine calls about a bill that or talks to me or you know, drives from Lakeview and shows up, you know, with a pitchfork and a torch and says, you know, you will listen. I do. And even if my name's on the bill and supportive, it matters. But what happens a lot is if they're concerned about a bill and someone else's name is on it, I know the other person's name on it. And so I can actually sit down while we're having lunch or maybe on the floor of the House or some other place and say, hey, I just had a constituent tell me here are some challenges with the bill. The good news about Oregon is we actually discuss things. And I mean, you hear about all the times we disagree, but that's about 20% of the time. 80% of the time we actually reach consensus and agree with each other. So the vast majority of the time we're actually in a dialogue and trying to get to the best result. And so I would say always start with your own legislator. However, if I'm on the bill and it's my name, like I gave you an example, I co-sponsored a bill that a constituent didn't like, and he contacted me and said, hey, this is what's up. And I said, gosh, you know, I didn't think about that. That is a good point. Sounds like we need to amend the bill. And then I went to the chief sponsor. The reason why you start with those names on the bill at the beginning and go through the committee like President Courtney mentioned is that we can adjust. Just because your name's on a bill doesn't mean you are 100% committed to vote for that bill when it hits the floor of the Senate or the House. At least that's my perspective. Because when I put my name on a bill, it's because I've reviewed the bill, I think it's a good idea, and I'm supportive. If I chief sponsor a bill, that means it's my idea, which of course I'm a little bit more connected to. But I don't know too many people here that I've served with who have said they bat 1,000 when it comes to good ideas. And so my recommendation in 2 cents is if you see their name on the bill, after you go talk to your own state representative, talk to to the person on the bill too, because you may have thought of something they didn't. And they could either change or try to get the bill changed to accommodate it, or they may say, you know, I'm going to take my name off the bill because I agree with you.
Thank you.
Well, over in the Senate, if you're my constituent, you're Courtney's constituent, and he's on the bill, you talk to your constituents. I mean, the constituents talk to their rep or their senator, and then the senator would go talk to the sponsor of the bill. We keep track of our offices keep track of information correspondence that comes in on bills, particularly if they're bills of high interest. And we will go to the sponsor and say, you know, we're receiving this kind of information, and don't you think you'd like to change or modify? And sometimes that happens long before the bill ever gets to a committee. The other bill, which Rep. McLean did not talk about, we also have bills that are introduced and come to us from the executive branch of government. They're not introduced by didn't come from a legislative concept or from citizenry, but where the agency wants to make some changes. So the governor would also offer up legislation, and they too, you know, have been amended during the process. If we find that the information or the research determines that really, whatever was embodied in the bill, that there was some things that needed to be changed. So I would concur that I would go first to my own legislator and talk to them before, and then allow them then to have conversation with the respective senator or legislator who sponsored.
I feel compelled to tell you this, Chuck, and also to all of you. I have this conversation a lot in my office. Let's just take another bill, like a bill like I introduced on texting and driving. So you really don't like the bill, and you're part of an organization that doesn't like the bill. Now, to be sure, you can go and look. The bill it's been filed, it's been assigned to a committee, and you can go and look on the bill and see who the sponsors are, and you can call them. But here's the thing you need to know, and it's really risky not to know it. We're in a legislative session. The best advice I can give you is you need to know where that bill has been assigned to in that committee. You need to know who the chair is of each, and you need to know who the members of that committee is. That's where you should go first. Because what may happen is you go to the sponsors, or whatever, your own rep, who aren't on that committee, and may not even be that familiar with the issue, because I just told you, as of the day, there's 665 bills in the Senate, there's 1,139 in the House, and there are going to be more. You'd be surprised, they may have heard more or less of something like that. But the key is this chair going to hear this bill or not? And when are they going to hear it? And that's where you want to be sure you enter the process if you have strong feelings. Well, do you understand that? Because what happens, you can go talk to your state rep or state senator or the sponsors, and all of a sudden that bill starts to move because they tried, maybe they said something to one of their colleagues, but they're on other committees. They're not on the committee that's dealing with it. So please, I really, and I've catch people by surprise, say, oh, I never thought of that. I said, yeah, that bill has been assigned to this committee. This is a chair. Have you talked to any members of the committee? They say, no. I said, well, you need to go interview those members immediately. So first, that they know that at least you have strong feelings about it. If they won't see you, maybe their staff will see you, but you understand what I'm saying. You cannot just rely on sponsors of a bill. It's the committee thing you need to zero in on now, especially during this session.
Thank you.
I agree with all of that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I think that your description of the state with population centers and then remote areas makes it more difficult for people from far places to get here. Is there some way, some provision that you have for people to participate in hearings without physically being here? Through Skype? Or some other electronic means?
We haven't used Skype, although I've been in committee hearings where I think it depends on the person wanting to testify. We will sometimes have people on the phone. We try not to do that too much because it's very important to be able to, have a conversation. But you can do that over the phone. They tend to be people who are experts. I've had folks who I've served in the healthcare committee, so we'd often have a particular practitioner from a rural community on the phone talking about how it was going to impact rural communities as opposed to an urban community. Mm-hmm. And so we'd have phone testimony. So we have done that in the past. I mean, the way you handle that is you talk to the committee administrator. When you go online and you can look at which committee, not only does it tell you who the chair is and the different members are, but it also tells you who the committee administrator is. You'd say, I hear this bill's up for hearing. I can't be there. Here's my story. Would you consider taking my testimony by phone? They could talk to the chair and see if that's, would work. I think it really depends on how much testimony they're taking and what your perspective is in terms of what you would add. We have done that in the past, but it does make it difficult. But again, what Senator Winter said is when the sign-up sheet for a hearing comes and you've traveled a long distance, it says, have you traveled more than 100 miles? You mark that, especially if we're packed, we always go, almost every chair will go to that set of folks first and say, so-and-so has traveled very far, come up and testify. So we want to make sure nobody has gone home without testifying, especially if they've come a long way.
When you have issues that are particularly, I won't say contentious, but there's a high degree of interest on both sides of it, mm-hmm. Do you have hearings in other places other than Salem?
I do Ways and Means, so yes. We've taken the budget hearings out across the state, really. We've taken it to the coast, taken it south, we've taken it to Bend, we've taken it to Portland. Ontario, yes, we have. We've also, I'm currently serving on the Public Safety Commission. We've taken those hearings and got a testimony and input from Bend and Roseburg. We've had so we do. When I was chair of Human Services, when I was in the House, and it was the issue dealing with the elderly and particularly the nursing homes and those facilities and its impact around the state, we took those hearings to around the state. So we do take hearings outside of this building and the chair and the administrators will decide, talk about where we go. But it hasn't been unusual or something that's a precedent that we haven't done that, because we do.
To be honest, it also depends about dollars. We used to do a lot more of that, as the legislative branch budget has been reduced along with all other budgets. So usually it has to be a very specific thing. So some of them are geographically based. I know there have been, if there's a coastal issue, they'll try to have a hearing on the coast, but we have been constrained by the inability, because these are public meetings, we have to come with all full audio recording, we have to be staffed, so the members have to get there. So unfortunately, we haven't done that as much as we've done in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, I raised this question because many years ago, like probably 25, 28 years ago, I was a technology expert and helped the state of Alaska put together remote places where people could participate fully in hearings. And it was very successful. With the capital being in Juneau, it's very difficult to get there. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot more work done in Anchorage, but also in Fairbanks and other remote places where they actually were able to set up the technology so everybody could testify and everybody could see it. And that's why I raised the question, because it is more difficult for people who live in Ontario or Pendleton or something like that to get here than it is for me, because I live in Portland. So
it's interesting, when I first was elected president, I had this grandiose idea, not only Ways and Means I wanted to put on the road, I wanted to put all policy committee on the roads. And it was a great idea. We still do it. I'm very proud of what we do in Ways and Means. We've been to the Pendleton Roundup on a Saturday morning with 200 plus people there, and then they put them on a helicopter and went down to Ontario in the afternoon, another 200. But we also have held those, and I remember had this thing that you're talking about for people in Bend to testify to a committee here. So we've done it with the Ways and Means process. We really have, but we haven't done it with the policy committees, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes,
and you really are challenging my thinking now. I can see in Alaska, you have to do it. If you didn't do that in Alaska, what were you going to do? I mean, that state, and I love Alaska, but boy, oh boy, I never thought of it. But we're a big enough state that maybe we're going to have to seriously consider that if we're really going to reach out to Ontario in policy committees, in John Days and Burns and Baker City, as well as Lakeview and places like that. So we're getting the point now we're using electronic things. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I'm not as savvy as I should be, but I know that we need to do more of it for the reasons you're talking about, to make sure that people don't have to come to this Capitol to have input. They can have just as much input through these modern ways of communicating.
Often the people out there somewhere are more familiar with the problem that you're dealing with than anyone here.
Right.
It's true.
One thing I would add is I tried to remedy that by having constituents submit letters. There was a hearing where it was bad weather, and so I got a bunch of letters in over the email, and so I went down to the committee room and testified and said I have 5 letters from my constituents. They couldn't be here today, and made sure they got in the record. I mean, I didn't have photos to hold up of them, but you mentioned Skype, or someone mentioned Skype. That may be a good idea, where we have sort of a Jetson-like monitor there, and because typically in the hearing rooms, at least in the House, there's 3 chairs. It would be interesting to have one chair that be a monitor, or maybe a 4th or something, where we could have some people from my district. Not the cows, but I mean the actual voters, that would and give them better access. Because when you're traveling from Prineville or Lakeview in the winter to come and testify for 3 minutes, that's why we don't necessarily have, sometimes people don't feel as connected to Salem as others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think mine's quick. Hi. I'm Chris Coleman from Portland. This is for Representative Kotec.
Hey there.
So if a group of constituents comes to you with an idea and convinces you that it has enough merit to perhaps draft a bill around it, how does the language get drafted? How does the bill itself get drafted?
Oh, it's a great question. And I appreciate that you preface it with, if it's something I agree with. I know there are some members who, will introduce anything a constituent brings in. I want to make sure it's, it's a reasonable idea and something that, even though I'm introducing on behalf of someone, I'd want to put my name on it. You come in with ideas. It could preferably not a napkin, but you come in with some ideas.
Something drafted. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, well, here are the, I think the easiest thing is, what's the problem and what are you trying to solve? Because then we give it to legislative counsel, which is our attorneys here in the building, and they go figure out how to put it into legal language. They know what statute it belongs to. They'll ask us questions. Well, you wanted this, but here are your options, and they come back to us. Often I'll go back to the individual whose idea it was, and it's like, we've got some options. What do you want to do? The best time to do it is in the fall, because we start drafting bills. It gives you some time to really work out the kinks. Legislative counsel drafts it, and then you can have it introduced really early. The challenge is that if everyone's trying to get everything drafted like in this week, which would be really hard, it's hard to get things moving quickly. But you need a good idea. You need to try to explain what you're trying to solve, and then we give it to the lawyers, and they go figure it out for us.
Cool. Great.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a couple questions online. Senator Cordy, do you want to read one?
This one is from Margaret Thompson from Springfield. How widely through the legislative/executive branch should I share my opinion about a pending bill? Is there any point in going beyond my own senator and representative? And I think we touched on that earlier, that at this stage of the game, if you have a bill you feel strongly about, to be sure, communicate with your senator and your state representative. You're all represented by a senator and a state representative. You're not one or the other. You each have a state representative who represents you and a state senator. Be sure that you communicate with them and their staff Again, we haven't said enough about that. Let me tell you something. Great legislators have great staff. Often their staff is the one you really want to get to. It's surely the case in my case, and it has been all the years I've been in the legislature. But then remember what I said earlier, Margaret, I hope I'm saying the name right. Please find out what committee that bill is in and immediately communicate your feelings to the chair, vice chair, and members of the committee the same way. Do not just rest with your senator and state rep. No disrespect intended. State reps and state senators here work very hard to represent the constituency. But if you got a bill that you feel strongly about, and obviously this person may feel strongly, do not just rely on your own state rep. Find out whether the bill, what committee is it in, and then make sure the chair and the vice chair. Why do I say that? The chair is usually one party and the vice chair is another party. That's just what we do. That's what you do here. And so, as well as there's Democrats and Republicans on the committee, and often, as Representative McLean, the House Republican leader, has said, we don't get into this DR thing. We work together on many things. So cover the entire committee. So I hope that answers Margaret Thompson's question. I hope that also, again, helps you understand what you should do if you now feel strongly about a bill that's here. Excuse me.
So this is a question from Jim Kreider, who's watching online. How can citizens counter the effects of lobbyists? Interests can hire people to represent them to be in your offices daily or weekly as needed. Those of us who have jobs don't have the opportunity to jump in our vehicles when an important issue comes up. How do you find a balance? So as someone who used to lobby down here, first of all, I would say is if there's an issue you care about, find an organization that supports that issue. Because there are all kinds of people who come down here and lobby, people who try to educate us and advocate for certain things. Some of them, might, there are special interests galore down here. Some of them are good special interests, some are bad, depending on your point of view. There are a lot of us who came down and advocated for kids and lobbied on that issue. So I belong to an organization called Children First. If you're interested in kids' issues and that was an issue they were working on, become a member of that organization. They can provide you information. They can get you, how to email and how you can stay in touch. And then that person is probably down here on a regular basis trying to be that face and that person in those set of ears who are talking to legislators on a regular basis. I think in terms of finding balance, it is really difficult for people to participate in the process. You know what? People have lives. They're busy. They work long hours. The only time they might be able to come down here is on the weekends. We don't tend to have hearings on the weekends. We do occasionally. We try to have evening hearings to accommodate people's work schedules, but it's tough. I do think you can make a difference by communicating directly with your legislator. And don't send the template email. Send a personal email. Put your name and address on it. Put your phone number on it. That matters to me as much as the paid person who comes into my office. If you write an effective email and you're my constituent, we listen to that. The balance is people have to be engaged. I respect the folks who get paid to be here every day. They're good people. They're just doing their job. But I don't think any of us believe that is more important than listening to our constituents or listening to real people. So if you make the effort, we do listen, and the balance does happen. But if you belong to an organization of like-minded individuals, you can pool your energy, so to speak, and there's always someone who represents your interests down here. You just have to find them, and they can be that point person for you when you can't be here.
I have a question about innovation. In particular with the shrinking budgets and the economy issues. There's an innovation that's in other states that we want to bring to Oregon, and it's in public safety. It basically reframes the problems of drugs and gangs as a civil issue instead of a criminal issue, and it allows people to use small claims court as a mechanism to assist property owners to abate the problem using everyday property management techniques. There's a law here in Oregon that prevents it in all the states. I forget one of your legislators. In California, we went to the Supreme Court and won. And soon there was a law passed that you can't use small claims court for people in the poverty areas to sue a property owner for emotional mental duress, what they deal with, and dealing with that. We're interested to know, how do we take something as innovative, and in fact it's a disruptive innovation. A lot of the police don't like it because it's 95% effective. So they've run into problems with police, public employees unions. It has a write-up by the National Justice. It's 95 effective, yet there's no funding for it because it's really a public issue. So how would you bring something like this to Oregon? Number one, identify the legislature. I've been in the law library trying to find this, that to write legislative, to try and overturn that. And three, since this is a statewide issue, I live in Salem, and I've already been dealing with this. We've already closed a couple of gang and drug houses down just using this technique, not having to go to court. 85% of the time you don't go to court once it gets going. So it's very effective. How do you take some disruptive innovation that would just save so much money, really is civic involvement when you talk about civilians getting involved? Because the civilians look at us like, hey, I don't care about drugs, you just can't act like this, the antisocial behavior. Simple property management, you either stop it or you get evicted. And if you don't stop it, every man, woman, and child in the block sues you in small claims court for the maximum amount. And that really takes money out of their pocket, and it changes their mind. So where would I go with this? I've just moved to Salem. I already have communities coming to me, members, and we already started this. But I can't do this again, basically. No, we want to bring this statewide. And funding behind it, because the funding problem becomes a problem because the lobbyists and, public safety, guards and prisoners and police. So how would we bring innovation to the great state of Oregon?
Well, in my district, we might solve it in a less civilized manner.
Yes.
But I suppose in urban areas, use of small claims court would probably be more appropriate. I think that is interesting. And even though we're in a deadline now, all of us still have what they call priority bills, an opportunity to still introduce a few more bills into this legislative session.
A pilot project.
So, maybe you talk to me after this meeting or something, and I might be able to help you out. But here's one way to do it, is you take your idea, and as the speaker just mentioned, going to legislative council, and you basically say, here's a problem, here's what we think is the solution, and here are some other states that have done it, like we'd reference California, and it was upheld at the state Supreme Court. Try to give them something to go on and describe it. And then you submit that to Legislative Council, and they do the research and come back with a draft statute which would permit the private claims and give jurisdiction to the small claims court to settle those claims under certain jurisdictional limit, like $10,000 or something like that.
Right.
And as a way to, in essence, what you're saying is introducing a private tort remedy of nuisance without a certain type
Public
of
nuisance.
common law factors. You introduce statutory factors of nuisance, being like, knucklehead and, et cetera. And then it would get dropped in the House or the Senate, and as President Courtney said, it'd be assigned to a committee, and then you'd have an opportunity to talk to that committee chair and vice chair and see if it moves.
And the problem, I'm looking for groups that would support my idea. I know Children First and all that. This really goes from housing to medical, because it basically kills crime 80%, and stress and everything goes up, and the problem we've had is housing goes up 45%, and then people come in and buy their houses, So the property owners are the ones that changed the law in the state of Oregon.
Well, and I would agree with what Representative McLean said, but I also, just to step back from your particular idea, because I think it's, it's worth exploring as well. I think it's interesting. There are a couple things. I think you always need a champion. You need someone who can get that bill drafted for you.
Right.
You look in the committees that you think someone's going to serve on, whatever that committee might be, and like, so-and-so's on this committee. I know they really care about public safety or health care. I should go talk to them and make their case, make the case to them, do the legwork for them. We all get a limited number of staff. But once a member decides, I really like this idea, I'm going to get it drafted for you, then that staff person helps you. I mean, we're here to serve. And so to have that champion, a good idea, having someone turn it into a bill, and then doing the research of finding allies, because one of the questions I will always ask somebody, if it's a unique and new idea, who else supports it? My experience, my first session here, there was a woman who worked really hard, almost single-handedly, to improve the ability of women to pump breast milk in the workplace. She literally came up with the bill, found a champion, found the research, got the bill draft. I mean, and she followed this thing to the end. And it's doable. And again, this is not like Congress. It might take a while. It might take a couple sessions, but you can actually get a bill done in the state of Oregon if you're a layperson or someone with a good idea. So don't be deterred, but you do need help. It's always good to have a legislator who embraces the idea, who can do the lifting for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the second one, was it, the question I had, you said it comes down from the governor and the different agencies within the head of state. You can bring, or through legislative session. Which one is better for something innovative like this? Both? I mean, where it's a statewide.
I think
the House of Representatives would be the superior.
Yes, the superior chamber, yes. Agency bills tend to be, housekeeping types things and things that,
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
In order to stay on track, we've scheduled about an hour for the first part with the members, so we probably, if there's one more really good question about process, otherwise we'll take a few minutes and let Jerry Curry from the State Library come in. He's going to talk about some more of the detail that they talked about some of the tools that are available to you. So are there any other questions that are very specific to the members of the panel? If not, we'll
Right here.
I think
Right here.
One last question then.
Okay, so this one's really simple. I'm an intern for Representative Alyssa Kennegar, and we've been going through a lot of bills. And the way you guys have been talking makes it sound as though every bill is assigned to a committee. Is that true?
Yes, every bill must be assigned to committee. We can't sit on.
No, well, they must
You guys have two
assign.
different
We have to.
shaken.
Well, we have to
They
assign the
must
bills.
assign.
Yes, every bill goes to a committee.
Okay.
I have 7 days to assign it in the Speaker's office. I don't know what your 5. Yes, when it gets introduced, we have up to 7 days on our side to assign it. So sometimes it takes us a few days to figure out where it should go.
What it does not mean is that, one, every bill gets heard.
Yes.
And also, what it does not mean that some bills have a fiscal impact on them, and if they have a fiscal impact, those bills go to Ways and Means, and they don't have to be heard in Ways and Means. So, I mean, there are places where a bill may not move in either across the floor and then go to the governor to be signed. So there are some stop places, and I know often people, because I'm in Ways and Means, so usually by the time a bill gets down to Ways and Means, everybody's calling you about hearing the bill or moving the bill. And Ways and Means is different than policy, because we have to look at budget implications. We have to look if we've got enough money in order to make it, to balance budget. Unlike Congress, Oregon cannot operate in a deficit. We don't have a printing press down there to print money. And I remind my constituents, we must balance the budget. The state must balance the budget. So that means we can't exceed the revenue that we have. So that's, so what, often you'll have a policy and you'll have somebody call, but this bill passed, how come they're not implementing it? Well, the reason they're not implementing because the dollars are not there in order to implement it. And while we're talking about that, I need to just bring up something else, because we're talking about how can you influence. Often, sometimes we get correspondence from citizens that ask us not to support something, or they're upset with something, and it's a national measure. It is not a state bill at all. And we get quite a bit of that, because the citizenry sometimes confuse the House with Congress. and they'll think that it is the House or that the state is Congress. And so I would say that, make certain that you know that it is a bill that resides within the state of Oregon, that it's something that's not congressional, because you'll get a communication back from us saying, please contact Wyden or contact Schrader or contact, this is your congressional delegation.
Just a little, I think the House Republican leader, McLean, spoke very well. I want you all to understand things, since many of you didn't testify, because I'm closing here. The question about lobby versus citizens came up. I'm going to give you two examples, and I've been around a long time. Years ago, when I was in the House, there was a young little girl, 5 years old, and her parents came to see me. They weren't of my party persuasion at all. I was the House Democratic leader. We were in the minority. They were more Democrat, Republican. There was a dietary deficiency that children can be born with. They call it PKU. And all the children of Oregon has to be examined on birth to see if they have PKU. Because PKU, and I can't give you the names, the medical names, I'm not that sophisticated, that if you don't adjust their diet, they will be mentally damaged by the time they're teens, and then they will probably have to end up being in institutions the rest of their life. But if you do certain things with their diet, foods and things, they can live a normal life. Otherwise, they can't go to dances, they can't do social, they can't do anything. So I introduced a bill. They had tears in their eyes because they were struggling with the cost. It is costly. To say that insurance companies, health insurance, had to cover the cost of PKU. And you should have heard the laughter. There's no way you're going to get that bill out of the House, Peter. Somehow we got the bill out of the House, but I figured, well, I had to tell them, we're not going to get it through the Senate. We're not going to get it through the Senate. Because the lobbyists were basically opposed to mandates, and I understand that. Well, I gave the best I could. I remember that day I went back to the House floor after I testified in a Senate committee in this very room. I was in the House. I came over to, and I remember the state senators. And I went back, and I got a note. They passed it out of the Senate committee unanimously. Well, they put a sunset on it. Do you know why they passed it out? Now, remember, lobbyists that you've heard to testify, do you know why? Children. Children testified on that bill. And members almost cried. Now, they put a sunset on it. It took me 12 years to get it removed. And the day it was removed, that 5-year-old girl was then almost 17 years old, was in the gallery crying. She was a senior at McLean High School. Do you hear what I'm saying? Last session, I had my heart broken because Lucy in a 76 gas station out on Broadway said to me, because I'm sort of that way, I go in and get my foo-foo coffee. It's called a Democratic foo-foo coffee, 99 cents. You push the button, French vanilla, something like that. I don't go to Starbucks. So I'm getting it. Lucy says to me one day, why is it my husband can't get Veterans Day off? And I said, what do you mean, Lucy? She says, well, my former husband who went to Vietnam, horribly wounded, mental problems, he died. He never got Veterans Day off. This was today, that day was Veterans Day, and my present husband doesn't get Veterans Day off. I says, oh, that can't be. Well, she was right. Veterans Day is for veterans, not necessarily. They don't necessarily get Veterans Day off. So I introduced the bill. Lucy came and testified, again in this very room, sitting there, terrified. She was terrified. She brought her son. She was shaking. I said, Lucy, we'll take care of you. Please come. You understand? She'd never been in this building. She works out 76, many years. She's struggling. And she was testifying from her former husband and her present husband. And she talked to us, equal number of Democrats, about why she wanted that holiday. And you know what? That bill was amended eventually because some of the business came out. It came out of that committee unanimously. It came off the Senate floor unanimously. Unfortunately, the House wouldn't give it a public hearing. So we're coming back again with it. My point is, no, because the House was giving me a hard time, so we'll see what they do. But here's the deal. Let me tell you something. Lucy had never been in this building. Lucy was terrified of this building. She was shaking. I had to beg her. Do you understand what she did? I believe we'll pass that bill this session. We'll be the only second state in the nation it says to a veteran, you get Veterans Day off. Seems to make sense to me. And if the business is so big it can't give it to you, they have to give you another day. We amended the bill to be sensitive to certain businesses. Again, I want you all to hear this, to understand that when we talked earlier about the citizenry and coming in, this state is still special, but we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it one day. Still today, the Lucys and Shirley, a PKU 5-year-old girl, I'm telling you, they won that bill. That, to me, you want examples?
I know what I'm talking about, and both of them, dramatic moments took place in this very committee room, with individuals sitting right there.
We'll give him the last word, but he's right, that this is the citizens' building. I think there's all 90 legislators probably have stories that they could tell you of legislation that they have passed because of a constituent or constituency. Has nothing to do with the lobby or the organized group. And that's what makes this building special. It's what actually, for some of us, keeps us here, because it's the personal stories often that someone coming in that has, in fact, I got off the elevator today and someone says, "You remember me?" And I looked and she said, "You remember the burn guy?" And Courtney was on that bill, the ultra repose bill that actually the company hated. It was fighting so this guy could actually get remuneration and compensation for an injury that had occurred to him, electrical injury, when he was trying to disconnect. Some wires fell on him, and the company responsible was out of state, refused to pay, and so he came to me, and I do remember, Courtney, you were on that bill. And so we sponsored the bill. In fact, I've got a picture with him with all his Band-Aids and everything on. So yeah, that is something special about Oregon. So I didn't mean to take the last word. That's good.
Thank you.
You reminded me of.
Sorry for my not so short question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That lady was in today.
We're going to take a quick 10 minutes, so
I
if
said
you would like, there's water and coffee out in the hallway. There are restrooms out there to use. And then as soon as we're done at 7:20, Jerry Curry from the Oregon State Library will carry on with the second half of the program.
And I did want to say something to someone who submitted a question via email that has really more to do with my area than the previous area. So, Jan Weston, we will get to your question.
For those of you in the room, over on the right-hand table over there, there's a very short, simple questionnaire. If you feel like filling it out, if there was something you particularly liked, didn't like, something you'd like to see in the future, if we want to continue to hold these to get more people to come to them, what could we possibly do to make it better? And if you are online and want to get a copy of the questionnaire, send it to the email address that we had posted for you to send your questions to, and we will email a copy of the quick survey to you and just return it to us, and we'll try to answer your questions as quickly as possible. So, are you ready to go then, Jerry?
I am ready to go.
And I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Curry from the Oregon State Library.
Welcome, everybody. Oh, I guess I've got to sit by the mic, so I don't have an option. I'm one of those people that likes to move around a lot. So, and now I think I feel like Wild Bill Hickok, I think, with all these people behind me, so we're playing poker. Again, my name is Jerry Curry. I work across the street at the Oregon State Library, but during legislative session, I'm really pleased to be I actually staff a little tiny legislative library that's up on the 4th floor. So, which is it's a great opportunity for me to learn. And I've been around a number of sessions. I think I started with the state in the late 90s, and I still learn something about session every session. So I don't have it all figured out either. And guess what? They vote new rules in every time. And the rules document, if you get it from the Senate side, it's 200 and something pages. So it is an extremely complex process, but I'm here to help you with that, I think. So if any of you folks remember Schoolhouse Rock up there on the right, you know, the old Mr. Bill, I'm just a Bill. So what we're going to do is talk about kind of tracking legislation and how to do that. And I'll tell you what, there's a new game in town, and it's a lot easier to do than it ever has been. So I was really, I love it when the members talk about people coming here. So if you could get here by wagon train, across the trail by horse, or something more futuristic, it is a good idea to be here. But I'll tell you what, you probably can do 90% plus of the work you need to do at your own desktop from wherever you are in the state or from wherever you are in the country. You really can. There are certain things where you have to have legs on I call them legs on the ground and eyes in the building, but we'll talk about maybe some ways to do that. So what I want you to not happen to you is I don't want you to become exasperated with the process. It is a complicated process. There's a lot going on. I mean, as the senator said, Senator Courtney, there's 2,000 bills, 1,700, 1,800 bills, and that number's going to grow. So how do you keep track? And that's a struggle. That's a struggle. So what we're going to try to do is try to prevent you from being as frustrated as Jimmy Stewart was in the classic movie. So the key, and I think the members did a good job of talking about this, is you are not alone. You're not alone in this process. There are people that can help you. The members are willing to help you, but they do get busy. And I thought it was interesting to say that, you know, in some sense, this is late in the process. It's early in the process for the session, but it would be late in the process to get, say, a legislative concept going. So we need to be thinking about these things in the fall, or some sort like that. So I'm with the Legislative Library. I'm up in room 446. Now let me tell you a little story about room 446. If you come to the building and you are not intending to go to the Legislative Library, but you're intending to go to one of the wings, when you get to 446, you'll be blocked in. I think there should be a sign up there that says, you know, who enter here, abandon all hope. Because you're actually in the old part of the building, and there's no way to get to the wing. So if you happen to go in 446, but your goal today or when you visit the Capitol was to visit a member, go down to the third floor and go across either chamber where you're headed, or go down to the first floor like we are now and just head through under the rotunda, through the Galleria, and then take a left or right depending on where you want to go. We're open from 8 to 5, and we can be reached at ledge.help@state.or.us. This PowerPoint will be online, and if you actually use PowerPoint, I think most of these links are live. Or we can be reached at 503-986-1668. Now, the new thing that we're going to take a look at a little bit later is the OLIS system, which is the Oregon Legislative Information System. I can't make the point strong enough that this has made things a lot easier to navigate. In the past, I used to call a lot of the systems were hard to use, and they were kind of librarian job security because I got a lot of questions. But I actually think a lot of people are going to be able to answer their own questions. And what happens is people are able to answer their own questions. The type of questions we get harder. So I think you guys are going to be putting me on my toes. We'll take a little peek around the legislative website because there actually still is a lot of information there that you might need, including using their search engine. And that is a bit of a challenge to use. And not all things work like Google. So we'll take a look at that. Talk a little bit about the e-subscribe system, which is a way that essentially from your own computer, your own remote access, you can have committee agendas and things sent to you. Keep up with members and what they're doing. Bills they're proud of, bills that they're proud they amended, what have you. So I get committee updates from the committees I'm interested in. I absolutely get updates from the members that represent me in this great body because I want to know what they're doing. I think it was kind of mentioned about other citizens. There are lots of folks that can help you with stuff. Just the hard part is actually trying to find them. And but you can find those constituent groups, you can find those lobby groups that basically agree with your position or you agree with their positions, and join them. One voice gets amplified. And I think I heard in one of the questions somebody was basically talking about doing research. We can help you with some of that at the Legislative Library. Our focus tends to be, Oregon specific, and we pull out the heavy guns for the members and the staff, but we can help you with things as well. But law libraries have, and including the State of Oregon Law Library, to put in a good plug for them, they have access to LexisNexis and Westlaw oftentimes that you can get on, and you can answer a question such as, what have they done in other states? Now, there's a crude way of doing that where you can hit all 50 websites from all 50 states, the legislative websites, and look and see what they're doing on things. If you have any hair left at the end of that process, let me know, because it's incredibly convoluted, because every state uses their own unique legislative language, and it's tricky. But there are things like, there are resources like LexisNexis and Westlaw that many county law libraries in the State of Oregon Law Library will have a public access point. So you can actually go in there and do that research. And that's really powerful to come to a member and say, you know, this is what I believe about a certain bill or a legislative concept we should work up. Look how well this worked up. Look how well this has worked out in other states. So that's a really good way to go. Okay, it's always kind of incumbent upon me to kind of go down to the basics, because interestingly enough, I get this question a lot. Something went through one of the chambers. Is it going to become a law? And there are still a lot of people that I think that are unfamiliar with the process. So there's a Citizen's Guide to the Legislature, which I think is where this presentation is going to live, and this PowerPoint is going to live. And there's a few things on there that I want to draw your attention to. And one is how a bill becomes a law diagram. Oops. And let's take a look at that. All right. Okay, this is just a very simple view of the Oregon legislative process. This flyer is available on that handout. I've seen it all over the building from time to time. Essentially, usually well prior to session, but sometimes during session if something's really hot. An idea gets formed. That idea could come from the citizens, as was mentioned by the members. It could come from the members themselves. It could come from a lobby group. It comes from a lot of different places. And what you have to, first of all, is get somebody that's willing to sponsor that bill. It doesn't have to be a member. It could actually be a committee. So during the interim, you could get in touch with a member that's part of an interim committee, and you could say, hey, I've got an idea about X, Y, and Z, and they could put it in for you. Perhaps. Step 3 is that bill gets drafted by a legislative council. I don't know. By the end of the session, I think actually their fingers get worn to little nubs because they work so hard. But they're drafting tons and tons of legislation. That bill is then introduced and read for a first time. That's called the first reading. We'll take a very quick look at some glossary things in a second. And then, as was mentioned again before, the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House have 7 days to assign that bill to a committee. Now, they can kind of sit on it for up to the 7th day. They can also put those bills in committees that aren't very friendly to that bill, so they have a lot of power sometimes of where things are going to be going, and that's one part of the process. I wouldn't call it a speed bump, but it's just a wrinkle that you need to know is where are they going to assign those bills. The bills, they hold a public hearing. Sometimes that's the extent of it. It gets a public hearing and doesn't go any further. It can have a public hearing and then a possible work session, which means if they've got the time, they may vote on it. I don't know if you could hear the commotion down at the other end of the hall here, but the river crossing just passed out of committee. I was kind of hearing the ayes. I couldn't hear the nays, so I didn't know the vote. It goes back to the first chamber, that the chamber gets a second reading, then a third reading, and when you see that a bill has a third reading, essentially at that point it's going to get voted on. Then basically the process kind of flip-flops. It goes all the way to the other side, to the Senate side, or the House, to the body that didn't originate the bill, and it starts all over again, unless it's heard by a joint committee, like something like Ways and Means or something like that. So if a bill has a fiscal impact, it's going to get a workup by the Legislative Fiscal Office to see what the fiscal impact of the state is by passing or not passing this bill. If the bill has a revenue impact, and if it's a revenue bill, it has to be, it's going to come in from the House side. It's going to get an impact statement or a workup from legislative revenue. So that's just a simple idea of how an idea becomes a law. It's not a super high percentage of bills become law at the end of the process. All right. Nope, don't want to do that. The other thing, want to talk a little bit about important terms to remember in the anatomy of a bill. Because sometimes these terms just don't mean anything to folks, and so it's important to know these. When a bill is introduced, that just means it has been assigned. It's hit the floor. It's going to be assigned to committee. The bill that's when a bill basically moves from a legislative concept, an LC draft or something like that, and becomes quote unquote real. A bill is going to get 3 readings. It's going to get a first reading. And then it heads to committee. It's going to get a second reading, which is when the bill is headed out of committee, and then it'll get a third reading when that bill's going to get basically voted on the floor. And there are documents that the legislative body produces that will help you kind of keep track of the bills. Okay, here's kind of the 3 E's that I think people don't necessarily, what does that mean? What does this mean? And one is an engrossed. When you see engrossed, essentially that means that is a bill that has been amended somehow. And oftentimes there's a little letter, next to the bill. It'll say engrossed A, engrossed B, engrossed C. That's essentially in a linear fashion. If it was engrossed J, it'd be 10 different times that bill has been amended. If it's a B, it means 2. And those are basically the versioning of the bill. It's just essentially like software. It's versioning. Another E word that we use is enrolled. So enrolled is essentially when a bill has been passed by both bodies. It's been, and actually at that point it is enrolled. I believe it can be vetoed and then have to be dealt with, but an enrolled bill has been passed from the bodies. That's correct. And then the other thing is the effective date of a bill, the third E. And the effective date is essentially when a bill goes into effect. Now some bills with actually kind of a fairly high percentage, not a super high percentage, but a decent percentage, and it's kind of increasing over the years, will have something called an emergency clause on it. And the emergency clause means that bill's going to go into effect as soon as it's signed. Okay, but the majority of bills, I wouldn't say the vast majority of bills, but the majority of bills will go into effect on January 1st after the year of passage by that session. Okay, or a bill can have a specific date. So it could say 90 days after sine die, which is the conclusion of the legislature, 120. It is, you've got to read the text of the bill in order to see when the effective date is. And then, of course, committee. It's a committee-driven legislature, as was mentioned. So those are the where the bills go and where the bills actually get their kind of their workout. And as I mentioned tonight was Columbia River Crossing. Well, read your local paper tomorrow. It'll be in there. And then bills can be referred. They can have a referendum clause, which basically is the legislative body referring it to a vote of the people. So we have an initiative and referendum process here in the state. Things can be referred to the people for a vote. So now, what does emergency clause mean? Emergency means it goes into effect immediately upon the governor signing, or if it goes, if it's passed and a veto is overturned. Emergency means we consider this to be an emergency and it needs to go into effect. There are some people, just speaking for a moment in a poli-science kind of way, that think that's a little bit overused, the emergency clause, but basically it's just a time. It's a time element. You bet. So just really quickly, I want to talk about the anatomy of a bill, because this is important when we use something like OLIS or something to search for a bill. Now, the first thing that you're going to see on a bill, and we'll take a look at one in a second, is the House of Origin. So what body did it originate in, the Senate or the House? Then you're going to see the version and the date. The version's going to be, again, it may have an A or a B or a C on it, which is it being amended. You're going to see a sponsor and co-sponsors. You may see a requester, or basically on behalf of. Could be a committee, could be the governor, could be a public citizen. You're going to see a summary of the bill and a title. And then you're going to get to the body of the bill. So let's take a look at a bill, because this actually is going to be pretty important when we look at OGIN, or I mean OLIS. So let's go here. Now, one of the hard parts of one of the difficult things about navigating the legislative website is it's extremely frame-oriented. And so a lot of times it's really hard. You'll notice, like, when I click 2013, or I click certain things, sometimes the URL doesn't really change sometimes, and that makes things kind of difficult to navigate the legislative website. And that's going to be going through a big change as well. I believe at the conclusion of session heading into the fall, these pages are going to look quite a bit different, and hopefully quite a bit easier to use. So I don't want to do that yet. Let's look at a bill. Senate Bill 510. Okay. Now, actually looking at the text of a bill will actually also give you an idea where that bill is at in the process. There's another way to do this by looking at measure histories, but right now I'm going to look at Senate Bill 510, and what it tells me is this bill's just been introduced. Okay. So looking at a bill, it tells me who is the sponsor of the bill. This bill just has one sponsor, Senator Ferrioli, and it actually tells me who it's on request of. So this is a private citizen that is interested in transferring the enforcement of wildlife laws to county sheriffs in each county. All right, so there's a bill summary. The following summary blah, 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 tells me transfer duties of wildlife enforcement from state police to county sheriffs. And then there's a related to clause relating to the enforcement of wildlife laws. Okay. So it's a fairly long bill, but I want you to keep this in mind. Access and Habitat Board. Let's just say that is a board that I'm very interested in, Access and Habitat Board. So keep that in the back of your mind, because I'm going to show you some of the strengths and the weaknesses of what OLIS can do. All right. Now, as we mentioned, right here on the main page is a new system. It's brand new. It got rolled out to the public on the first day of session, February 4th, when they reconvened. And it's called the Oregon Legislative Information System. This is a godsend because it really will save you a lot of time, and it really puts a lot of information in one place, and it's a fantastic finding tool. It takes a little getting used to, because for folks that have been using the old way, this is a very new way of looking at things. You can access it here on the main page, right front and center, or off to the right, you can look at OLIS. Now, what librarians like to talk about a lot of times is discovery paths, how we find information, what routes do we go down to find things. And this is very much a system that is being enhanced, is being worked on. When I was using it last week, I didn't see old session stuff in there. Now there's old session stuff in there. Last week there was a thing that said log in. Well, that's for staff. And so now it says staff login, because I was getting people calling and going, how do I create an account in OLIS? And so they are very, the folks here in the body at the Capitol are very, very receptive on making changes. So this is great. So you can go by session. Every day of session, you can come to this page. It will tell you the meetings that are being held today. All right, so these are the committees that were actually meeting today. House Committee on Higher Ed, House Committee on Revenue. There's a Joint Committee on General Government. And if you hover over this little guy all the way to the right, that little symbol, it's going to get you to a place where you can get to the agenda of what that committee dealt with today. Meeting materials, those are the exhibits that were put in. And then a recording log. And actually up at the top where it says meeting details, you can click and actually look at the audio. So in the past, with the legislative website, you used to have to find a status of a bill, then you'd have to figure out what committees heard it, then you'd have to go to audio, video, and you'd always have to spend this game where you were matching everything up. And it took a tremendous amount of time. Now, what they're really doing is they're putting everything on one page. And it's not just current stuff, it goes back in time. So if I wanted to, let's go to a more, general government is just getting off the ground. So let's find one a little more interesting. Okay? And there's all the old Senate Committee on Judiciary. So to answer one of the questions that was mentioned today is if you want to find who's on what committees, a really easy way to do that is you just come over here and you can click the main page, or you can come over here to committees, look and see who's had a meeting, click Senate Committee on Judiciary, and very quickly you've got a list of all the members that you can contact. And another really great folks to talk to sometimes are the committee assistants and folks like that to figure out, is my bill going to get a hearing soon? What do you think is going to happen with respect to a bill that I'm interested in? They can give you sometimes a little bit more detailed information about where that bill is in the process. All right. The other place you can go is the committee's link, and that will give you some information too. If you want old information, like you missed a hearing, you could just move back in time. This has a link to anywhere in since the session has started. And if you want to watch video of the floor, so say something's getting a third reading and you want to see how it's going, you could do live video. Okay. Now let me show you one of the difficult things about this system. So we're gonna go down another discovery path, and we're gonna do bills. Okay. Because the big questions I get at the legislative library are, what is the status of a bill? I get that question all the time. Well, that's going to be easy to answer with OLIS, and I'll show you. I get another question about how to provide input on a bill. Well, that was kind of answered by the members, but what I usually do is I'll research the bill, what committees it's been referred to, refer people to the members that are staffing that committee, refer to the legislative administrator and the legislative assistant, and that's who I refer people to. But another question I get is how to find bills. How do I find bills on X, Y, and Z topic? Now, this tool is good. It's very good, but it does have a limitation. So if I know a bill number, I can just put it in there. So if I know it's Senate Bill 510, I can just do 510. Okay, it's going to find it. It's also going to find things that are like 510, that have 510 in the string. Okay. Now, another great thing about OLIS is all the information it puts on one page. It tells me that the request of, the chief sponsor, related to clause, the summary, fiscal impact. It may have a fiscal impact, but no statement's been issued yet. So that means if this gets further along, fiscal's going to have to work it. Revenue's not going to have to work it. If there's a staff measure summary, that will be here. It's not going to be one in this one because it's too new. And if there are impact statements, they're going to be in there as well. It's going to tell me the current status of the bill. So that's one of the big questions you get is, where is this bill that I'm interested in finding? Where is it at? So right now this bill is in the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. If I want more information on that committee, I can click that. It's going to give me the members. It's going to tell me when they meet. I have access to their meetings. I have access to their audio. I have access to their agendas, and I have access to their exhibits on other bills that committee may have heard or has heard. So that's pretty neat. It will tell me when it's scheduled for something. So right now it hasn't been scheduled. It's going to tell me the contacts of people that I might want to get in contact to find out what's going on with that bill. And then it's going to give me the measure history. So that's a lot of detailed information on one page. That's if I know a bill number. That's not the most common question I have, because I think people can figure out, if they have a bill number, what's going on with their bill. The big question is, what are bills? I'm interested in bills on topics X, Y, and Z, and how to use this as a discovery tool. And here's where I assume they're gonna address this, but they're not there yet. So let's look at 2013 again and look at that 510. All right. All right. So there's all the information of the bill. It's not a super lengthy bill, but it's still 6 pages. That's a lot to go through. If I search OLIS, it's only going to search 2 parts of the bill. It's going to search the related to clause, so it's going to search wildlife laws and enforcement, and it's going to search the summary. which in this case is an extremely short summary. It doesn't search the text of the bill at this point. So if you want to find all the bills on foreclosure or something like that, it's going to come up a little lacking at this point. All right. I think this will be back-ended, but they wanted to get this out, and like I said, it probably answers 80% of the questions, but for a true discovery tool, it's still got a little ways to go. So remember that example I wanted to use, which was the Access and Habitat Board. And you got to spell it right. It's not going to find that bill. But if I did, let me cheat for a second here. Wildlife law enforcement. If I did wildlife, there's Senate Bill 510. And if you mouse over, it's going to give you the summary of the bill. So for a true discovery device, it's still a little tricky to use. And I'll give you basically an alternative. All right. Let me go back to the PowerPoint again. Okay. Let me mention a couple other things about OGIN as well, OLIS as well. I always make it OGIN, which is judicial's thing, so I need to change that. Is you're going to have easy access to agendas, but you're going to have archived audio, you're going to have recording logs, and you're going to have archived exhibit access for at least a couple sessions. So that's a really, really great thing. Those exhibits that were put in on behalf of a bill, you're going to be able to access them. And when that comes into play is a lot of times I'll get the question, do bills carry over into the next session? Because other states, there are other bodies that can do that. That's not the case here in Oregon, but if you want to introduce a bill that's very close to a bill that's been heard before, you might want to go back and see how that bill passed to the body, and then you might want to look at the exhibits that were submitted pro and con on behalf of that bill to see what people had to say about it. And you will be able to get to these old exhibits at least for a session or two until they go to archives through OLIS. Through OLIS. Okay. The only other thing that I don't see in OLIS that I'd like to see is it doesn't summarize member voting records. I'll get a question a lot is how did my member vote on X, Y, and Z? How has my member been voting? It will show you how the members voted a bill out of committee. But right now, I do want to put a small plug-in for gov.oregonlive.com. That's a very, very good, and they're using the legislature's data. It's a very good site for tracking member votes, which is very important. Okay, let's talk about finding bills again.
What was that again?
It's called Oregon. It's the Oregonians' Your Government resource, and it's gov.oregonlive.com. When you use it, you'll actually see they put everything on one page, but that's very much like the system we have here now. So I don't recommend it that much anymore, except to say it's a great way to track how members vote when things hit the floor, not out of committee, but floor votes. Okay, so now we want to find bills, and I want to know what all the bills are on a topic, because I want to follow that topic. The UltraSeek search engine doesn't work like Google at all. And I could show you an example of this, but I could just talk about it here. Where you find this is off on the right on the legislative website. It'll say full measure search or measure, and that's the link to the search. And it's actually in OLIS now too. There's a link to that. So say I'm looking for bills about state police, and this was current as of just a few hours ago. If you type state police in the search box, which is what everybody who uses Google is going to do, they're going to type state police, and they're going to think they're going to get good hits. You're going to get 1,597 bills, and that's even just limiting it to bills from this session. Now, who's got time to look through 1,597 things? But very few of them are going to be relevant to what you're searching for, because what this search engine does is it defaults to an or search. So what it says is if I find the word state or I find the word police in a bill, return it. Okay, and guess what? This is going to get worse, because as the session goes on, all the different versions of bills and stuff start going into the search engine. So if I do state police, say in a month from now, I bet I'll get 3,000 bills. Okay, so you can't look through that. But that's the trick. It doesn't work like Google. Google would take that and say, and I need state and police. So one thing you could do is you could do state and police in the search box. And that's going to get me 146 bills. All right, now what I've said to the search engine is anytime you see the word state and you see the word police, return it. And it's kind of neat because it tells you 1,597 bills use the word state and 146 use the word police, but I need both, so it takes the lower number. So that's a little more manageable. But, and this is a Google trick too, folks. If you want good results, do quotes. Okay, when I do state police in quotes, I get 89 bills, and it tends to rank things by relevancy. So what we'll do is it will return the bills to the top that it thinks are on the topic most having to do with state police. So if there's a bill out there that only mentions state police in one little tiny section of the bill, that state police shall do this, and that's probably going to show up near the bottom of the 89. The very first bill that shows up is their budget bill, for example, related to the budget of the operation of the Oregon State Police. Boom, right at the top. Okay. The other place that people often track legislation is you have an ORS. You're a business owner, you're a concerned citizen, there's something going on. You've heard there's a bill number that's going to amend an existing ORS, and that's of interest to you. Let's pretend we're interested in Chapter 565. That has to do with the state fair. If you use OLIS and you type in an ORS number, you're not going to get any hits back because, again, it's not searching the text of the bill. So the legislative website, the full measure search, is really good at that. I can type in 565, 120, or something like that, and it's going to return one bill. So it's a tool that's a little hard to use, but once you know the rules, it's not so bad. Now the last thing I'm going to mention is don't forget about paper. I think in an electronic world we tend to kind of laugh at paper, but paper can do certain things because what happens is all the bills that are introduced are assigned essentially a subject heading. And this is a controlled vocabulary. So has anybody ever used a database and you're typing stuff in that you think, I ought to be getting retrievals, I ought to be getting hits, but you don't get anything? It's because you're using the wrong terms. And the database isn't smart enough to say, oh, if it's this, they must mean this. Some are, but some aren't. So this weekly index is fantastic. And I'll give you an example. If I had a question about, and I did have a question, somebody wanted to know all the bills on foreclosure. If I use OLIS and I put in foreclosure, I'll get 6 bills. If I use this index, which I'll show you where it is on the website, and I look under foreclosure, I'll get about 16 bills. And suddenly, one's not going to sneak by me because I have a lot better idea of all the other stuff that's out there. And also encourage you to use the index when you're trying to find statutes as well. The paper indexes are amazing, and they're all scanned. They're PDFs. They're available. Okay. I think the folks talked about how to submit testimony and how to testify before a committee, but I do have some links to that. And then there's this wonderful e-subscribe service. That link seems to be broken. I should fix that. And that's basically a way to keep up to date on what's going on your bills. Now, if you ever want to find these documents, the paper documents that I talked about, you can find them a couple ways. Right front and center above OLIS is the 2013 legislative session at a glance. You can click that, and then you're going to find things like the Index of Legislative Measures. That's the one I'm talking about. It gets produced weekly. 2013 legislative calendar, status reports, all kinds of stuff. So I think what they're trying to do here is they're trying to make it available 3 different ways. 1, paper, which is scanned PDFs. 2, navigating the top nav bar up there and just looking for stuff. Or 3, using the OLIS system, which is, like I said, is really great. Now, one last thing I want to mention about ORSs. The Oregon Revised Statute, the legislature's going to adjourn sometime in June, probably, maybe a little later, maybe a little lighter than that. They're going to pass bills, and they're going to be passed into Oregon law, and they're assigned to chapter law. So each year, the legislative body produces a document. It's called Oregon Laws. Okay. And then every other year, they're basically put into Oregon Revised Statutes. Now remember about that effective date we talked about earlier. So if I'm looking for, I'm asking a question that lawyers ask a lot, is this still good law? Or essentially, has this ORS been amended? this is really important. Because you may know enough to go to the ORS and look, but be really careful, because this is 2011. There's been 2 sessions since then. There's been a 2012 session, and there was that one-day session that they recently did at the end of 2012 as well, a special session. So things could have been amended to essentially, when you're looking at law, you're looking at old law. It's no longer good. So what you can do is you can go to Bills and Laws, look at 2012, and then every year they produce this really, really wonderful table, which is called Statutes Affected by 2012 Measures. Look at the ORS number that you're interested in trying to follow, and basically look at that table and ask yourself the question, was there basically a successful bill passed that session that amended that? And then you basically know the answer to, is that law still current? And I'll tell you what, I get questions from that by lawyers all the time. So it's not just you. So I'm pretty much wrapping up to be done at 8. I'll take some questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll write them down. That's what librarians are really good at. And again, I really thank you for your time. What I want you guys to really remember is this, is that, one second, you're not alone. You've got people here that can help you, a lot of people here that can help you, and you have librarians that will do a lot of heavy lifting and do some work for you. We get calls, emails, people walk in every day, and that's my job, and that's what I love to do. So thank you.
Jared, can I ask you a question?
You bet.
I'm probably not going to remember all of this.
Okay, if you don't come up, I'll just try to repeat it. So.
Okay, I'm probably not going to remember everything you told us. Is there like a way you can go to a little help site and it'll remind you of how to do it?
Well, the PowerPoint will be on there. My phone number is, the phone number for the Legislative Library is on there. And with respect to OLIS, let's see if we can get back. There is a help button that will tell you how to navigate, how to find a bill, basically how to use this new system.
Oh, thanks. That's what I wondered.
Thank you for the question. All right, anybody else? Well, like I said, we're here to help you at any time. And again, thanks a lot for coming out on a great night. So, thank you. No, thank you.